right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Here to have our final discussion on Anathem, and everybody's here, including Victoria, which is so exciting. So happy to have her here since she wasn't able to come to the halfway live because her and Dia were together. And so Dia will be here today also. We were talking about that before we went live, that Dia will probably be in the comments today, and she couldn't be last time. So yeah, so this is exciting to have finished Anathem and be able to discuss it. So I figured we could I don't have bullet points or notes. I know that Rich has lots of notes and discussion questions, so I'll be leaning very heavily on him. But I thought we could go around and kind of talk about like our general thoughts, just kind of like what we thought of the book as a whole, and then get into more specifics afterwards. So who wants to go first? I guess you're first, Rich, in my rotation, if you want to go first. I know this is a reread for you, but...
Well, sure, yeah. That's something so obviously I love Anathem, right? You know, it's almost a meme at this point, but I did, in fact, enjoy this read, in some unique ways. I mean, obviously, there were a lot of things I was looking for and anticipating. There are also a few things I kind of picked up and some nuances I didn't actually appreciate before. So it's nice thing about this book is I feel like you get something different out of it each time. I'm sure if I read it 3 times a year, I might run out. But, for me, it's like every 2-3 years I read it or something like that. And it was nice and fresh for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Stephanie, did you finish this morning?
Yes, I did. I finished about 15 minutes before the live show started.
You go, girl. I knew you could do it. I believe in you.
The second half kind of felt like a fever dream. Like, I don't think I could tell you what happened. There were parts that I enjoyed. And I think if I were to ever reread this, now that I have a little bit better ground in it, I feel like I would get more out of it and maybe be able to follow.
Dia agrees.
Yeah, maybe be able to follow. But I actually messaged Tiffany and Dia this morning, and I was like, I don't know what's happening.
And we both said, we don't either.
Yeah, and so
we need Rich.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm not the target audience for this book, but I'm glad I read it. And it definitely, like, even the last live stream, we had such good discussions around it. So to me, that was like the most fun. And then throughout the discussion, learning more like what actually happened in the book and what was going on. But I do like that there was some humor in it, which I really enjoyed. And I'm happy with the way it ended. I have no complaints. Yeah.
How about you, Victoria? How far did you get in it? Did you finish or? I didn't think you finished, so I was just wondering where you were.
I liked how you phrased that.
How far did you finish? Because we know you didn't finish.
So I thought I heard you didn't. I thought you said you weren't able to finish it. That's so.
I didn't. You were correct. I did not finish it. This is a correct assumption.
I think I told her because you told me.
Yeah. I was like, I feel like someone told me that you didn't finish. I didn't just make that assumption.
Yes, that was me.
I didn't.
I was on the telephone.
It's all good. I did not finish it. I got about 220 pages, so I'm like way behind. I do not care if you spoil me. So I'm literally just here to like hear if I should push through or not, because I'm inclined to DNF, and I am kind of at peace with that decision, possibly. But I could be swayed. I could be swayed. So
it's your job, Rich.
Like, I don't even care if you spoil me, because I probably won't understand what I'm reading anyways half the time. So maybe if you spoil me, I'll actually enjoy it a little more.
You might be able to pick stuff out easier.
It's like the preface to a classic.
Right.
And that's not to say that I'm not appreciating things about it. Like, it's clearly an author who is very witty, and like I really do enjoy the humorous aspects of it. it's where it's like following the plot and the concepts and the sciencey things that I'm like, I don't think I'm grasping what I'm supposed to be grasping. And for me as a reader, just to like read something for fun that is a frustrating feeling, just because I don't have a lot of like headspace for it right now. But like I'm just kind of wondering, like, do I continue or do I just say I tried my very best? I'm done.
I feel like it needs a guide to go with it. Kind of like the Wheel of Time has the like compendium. This needs one of those.
I didn't realize until like this week that there actually is there's like
I know
there's a glossary.
But
there's a glossary. Yeah.
And there's also a timeline.
Yeah.
Well, I had a lot of fun with the glossary once I realized there was one. So I was like, oh, now I can. I mean, I was sort of able to guess a lot of the meanings, but like some of them, it was like really helpful to have the glossary.
Well, I think there's a spoilery trick. Once you realize what's going on in the story and you're rereading it, almost all the events on Arb correspond to events in human history. And so when you realize Baz is Rome, Bayesian Orthodoxes are Catholics, Counter-Bayesians are Protestants, the reconstitution happened in the 2000s or whatever our time. I think Ethnos was Greece, Protus is Plato. When you kind of realize all of those connections, suddenly it just becomes much easier to keep it all straight.
Okay, yep, nope, didn't realize that.
Well, yeah, Victoria, where you're at, you would not. I mean, that's something about the use of language in this book is it's very intentional to make it a non-earthly setting, but then to introduce that contrast.
Yeah, it makes sense because of the Hylian theoric world thing. That's why there's so many similarities. It all makes sense to me now.
Yeah, and there is a timeline at the front of the book also. Like in the note to the reader, there's a bunch of clues in there as well to help. And the timeline, if you just look at it, like 0, AR 0, whatever is roughly our time. Like the Harbingers sort of correspond to the world wars in our timeline and so on.
I agree, Dia.
That's really interesting. I didn't catch on to that at all.
What are the sacks, Rich?
What's
in our
that?
history? What are the sacks in our history?
Well, that would be in our future. That'd be like 1,000 years in our future.
Oh, so those haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say everything makes sense, but the fact that there are so many similarities makes sense, because when we were first reading it, I was like, why is this so similar to Earth, but it's called Arbre or Arb whatever instead. But it makes sense because the theory of this work, at least I'm rereading it and I'm getting the theory more as I'm rereading it. The first time through I didn't get it because I was listening to quite a lot of it. But as I'm rereading it, they have this Hylian theoric world where we it's like a cloud. Like we all of the different planets, like the 4 different planets that we're talking about, they all have access to this cloud where the ideas are. And so that's why we develop along similar lines, is because those ideas are true everywhere. Yes, I'm reading already. Yeah.
I know Christy and Rich are like up here and we're just like down here, like I don't know what's going on.
Peasants.
Yeah, no, but you've got it, Christy. I mean, the concept is, it's like, how in the Cosmere you have like the spiritual realm, the cognitive realm, and the physical realm. Well, this has a similar concept, except there's just an infinite number of them. And, like the Hylian theoric world is at the top, and Arb is somewhere down here, and Earth is somewhere below that. And they're all kind of connected through each other, and things become more ideal as you progress up the chain and more idealized, I guess is the idea, more like theoretical and conceptual and less physical. At least that's the like the gist of the universe. And so, but they're all, Earth and Arb are the same world, just in two different parallel dimensions. And then the story, it's all tied in through what they call the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. So the idea is every time anything happens, you can imagine a parallel world where it didn't happen. And so there's infinite numbers of these, or very large numbers of these, and they're all, you know, various shades of gray leading from one to the other. And so as you get further out, it's like the butterfly effect, you know, little differences make them different, but they're kind of all the same.
And it's so interesting that, at least where I am right now, that the least advanced one is the one that figures out how to hop from dimension to dimension. Dimension's not the right word, but they figure it out before the more ideal worlds. What? Sorry.
World tracks. That's
the world track. Yeah. How did they figure out how to hop it first if they're the least ideal? But it is interesting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's you know, idealism and intelligence, and of course there's like a concept like in Arb, they sort of live in this world of technological, sequestration. You know, like they're intentionally holding back their technology because, you know, it's the whole thing is a post-apocalyptic world, you know, where they had the terrible events, and it's kind of veiled in mystery, but you know, the impression is that it was almost the extinction of humanity, you know, and so now it's like, you know, we got to keep these scientists under wraps because, you know, the politicians can fight their wars, but like, let's get the nuclear weapons and stuff out of it.
Yeah. And it does seem like that was a good decision. Seeing as how they were actually planning to send these world destroyers. What's the term again? I can't remember. But they did end up, these intellectuals did end up sending world killers or everything killers.
Everything killers, they called them.
They did end up sending them. Thankfully, there was enough of a resistance that didn't happen. But I mean, it happened, but it didn't. It depends
which world track you're in.
Yeah.
That's where I got confused. I was like, wait, which one of these are real, and how come you can make some of the things that happen in an opposite world track still be true here? And Erasmus remembers multiples of them, but like that's where I was like, what just happened?
So the concept, and I don't want to be just giving answers because like these are like the interesting questions of the book. Like the concept is that, you know, and this is what's kind of Orlo's explaining up on the mountain, you know, before, you know, in Orthena, you know, the idea that the brain, and this is, I think, Roger Penrose's concept in the real world, that the human brain uses quantum mechanical effects. It's essentially a quantum computer, and therefore it's capable of perception subconsciously across different parallel universes. And so like Fra Jad has the ability to experience different things, and so does Erasmus, you know, by being with him. So it's not like which is the real thing. In some sense, they're all the real thing. It's just like this is this idea where every time you make a decision, there's another version of you in another universe that made a different decision. And so they're both real. They're just which one are you following?
So the interesting thing to me was that some of the things that happened in these other like parallel universe type situations still affected the one track that Erasmus came back to. And that's where I was like, how do you do that? Like, which I guess that's Fra Jad. That's like what he's able.
Well, when you look at it, the way
they use for him, but you know, that's what the
an incanter is. The
term I was
gonna
say that's what the aliens are after, is the ability to do things in another thing that then affects the world track that everyone else is in, which is then like, you know, the story with the bowl with the scratch and that whole.
Well, if you look at it, there's kind of two ways that you see him using his power. The one is kind of like probability manipulation. Like, you know, like they come up to a door, he just punches a random code and it happens to be the right one to unlock the door. And it's like, well, in 10,000 other universes, he punched the wrong code, but we're following the story where he happened to pick the right one, and so the door opens, you know. So like that's the one way, and like they talk about like the myriad of ways the mission could have failed, but it didn't. And it's sort of like, well, it's because you're just kind of selectively following the story that works. So that's like the one trick he seems to play. And then the other trick is it's not so much that the things he did directly impact the world he's in, at least doesn't seem that way, but other people can perceive it. Like, so, you know, like he goes and he kills off all the Ernudans in the one timeline, and then suddenly the leader of the pedestal or whatever is willing to negotiate because, you know, and Jad kind of says to the leader of the Fulcrum or whatever that it's like, well, they might have thought of it as a bad dream or something, like a premonition of bad things or whatever. And this is because there, you know, something so dramatic happened in this nearby universe that, you know, you had like this premonition of doom, and thus you're like thinking maybe we shouldn't be so hard-nosed in our negotiations. You know, I don't know. That seems to be it. But that said, in the book, you know, there's stories of digging up dinosaurs in parking lots and things like that, you know, at one point. So like weird stuff happens.
Dia's comments are just cracking me up.
I know.
I love it.
We love you,
She should write jokes
Dia.
for. Honestly, your jokes could fit into this story, I think.
She did really enjoy the humor.
dialogue.
It's very appropriate. On my screen, one of Dia's emojis that she used on her first message is like it's like replaced by a spinning dial-up picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't want to be in like an explanation mode. I have a question for you guys. Did anybody notice a parallel? Like anybody remember how the book starts? The very first scene.
It starts with the outsider guy coming in and like kind of interviewing them, I guess, talking to Arolo and Erasmus.
Yes, and what's Erasmus's role in this?
He's writing things down, right? Isn't he? But he chooses not to write down some of the conversation, I think. But.
Yeah, and the term he uses for that is amanuensis. You know, he's basically a scribe, just a fancy word for a scribe. And what happens at the end of the book where Erasmus is following Jad around everywhere? What's his role?
Is he an amanuensis again?
Yes, in fact, Jad actually
calls him.
He's there to serve as amanuensis. No, it's all right. It's all right. It's
I'm the student in the back of the
I've read
class
this
that
book
doesn't
like
want to
5
be called
times.
on.
I did not pick this the first time. It's just something I find so sorry. I wanted to ask it rather than
spit out my coffee
saying it.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. I didn't catch that.
I would not be a good teacher.
No, it's not you.
No, you would be.
It is not you, Rich.
The way you explain it makes it more clear, honestly.
Yes. Yeah, it really does. That's why I was looking forward to the live show, because I'm like, okay, I don't really know what's going on here, but I feel like talking to Rich is going to make it better, because it really did after the first half. So
yeah,
you do great.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Erasmus is like very much an everyman sort of character in some ways. And in a lot of ways, he's there to represent you. Like, obviously, he's taking more quantum mechanics, but like at the end of the story, he's like kind of like playing catch up. Like he's kind of got some idea that, you know, this is not normal. And he kind of has a vague idea what's going on. But, you know, he's kind of there for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's so funny because he keeps presenting himself as like the not bright one among all of his friends, and I'm like,
yeah,
boy, if you're the not bright one, yeah.
But he's catching on to a lot of Arolo stuff much faster than his friends are. So it's really funny that he sees himself as like having no idea what's going on, but then he comes out of all this experience with Fra Jad, and like he knows so much more than other people do, because he experienced different parallel world tracks at the same time. Meanwhile, for all of them, they're like, he died. like at the beginning. What are you talking about?
Mhm. I also love that toward the end, it was just like, well, I won't write that down because this would become a different kind of manuscript. Or no, I can't write that down because this would become a different kind of thing. And
Yes.
I like that he kept a sense of humor.
Yeah,
Yes.
the humor in this book was really good.
Oh, throughout. I that's very typical of Stephenson. Like all his books have that kind of witty, dry humor. It's very fun.
So is La Terre the French name for Earth? Because I don't know any French.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm asking because what's his real name? Jules Verne.
Yeah.
Jules Verne, obviously the human. Obviously, he's from Earth, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he called Earth La Terre, and I was like trying to figure out when I first read that. I was like, wait, is it not Earth? But then he kept making references to things like, was it relativity?
La
Yeah.
Terre.
Relativity.
You're right.
So La Terre is the Earth.
Yeah.
Okay, so that maybe that's what they call it in French.
I just Googled it. So that's what.
Nice catch, Christy. I did love that he was called Jules Verne.
I did too.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Yes.
It seemed very fitting.
Yeah, I never picked up that, Terra, yeah. I agree with Mia just commented that in a lot of ways Erasmus is the heart rather than the brain in a lot of ways.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So I actually want to ask a question. What people think of Erasmus as a character? I know Dia commented that she seemed to really like him and his principles and so on. Here's a question. How much agency does Erasmus actually have? Because it seems like he's just kind of following around and going to where he's told. And there was the one little bit with the food he ate, that maybe was, some initiative. There were things, but it seemed like a lot of the book he's a narrator.
Yeah. Or things just kind of happen to him. He doesn't choose for these things.
Yeah, I very much felt like Erasmus is just like kind of how you were saying earlier is just like just a venue for us to see the story. But like Erasmus as a character, I didn't feel like I knew very much about, or like his personality, or could get a grasp on his personality. Like it was more like he was a vehicle for us. And that's, I guess, something that I struggle with this book is that the characters, to me, I've had a hard time making them distinctive in my brain. And then I'm like, wait, who is this person? Okay, this name and this person. And I'm just like, they're not, like, the characters are not sticking out to me as any kind of strong personalities. So it's sometimes hard to like put it down for a while and pick it back up and be like, okay, who are these people?
Yes.
That plus some of the
agree.
terminology. I took a week off after our last live show, and I'm like, what do these words mean again? I should not have done that.
I have no memory of
Yeah.
this place.
And I don't have a glossary in my book because I bought mine used online, and I got sent an ARC for some reason, and there's no glossary in it. And I was like, okay, so we're just figuring this out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Oh, interesting. I agreed with Victoria that I didn't feel like Erasmus had like a super strong personality. Like kind of it
Or, like,
makes it easier to kind of
risk
insert
for that.
yourself a little bit.
I think as I'm rereading it, I'm understanding who everybody is better because I understand their endpoint. And so I can remember, oh yeah, this is the one that is from Earth in reality. Like the first time through, I did not pay any attention to Javarn, like no attention because I was just listening. And then the second time through, I'm like paying all of the attention to Javarn, as he's like explaining everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who is it? I think it's Jad. Jad knows before anybody else that Javarn is not from Earth. Like you could tell. So I'm noticing now that I know where people end up, it's a lot easier. But the first time through, I couldn't tell one from another to a large degree. That was really a struggle for me. But to me, it was like after I understood the whole picture, I was so much more interested that I could more easily follow them. So I think Rich is right on reread. It's like it really comes alive for me on reread. I really enjoyed it the first time through, but I was having a hard time reading with my eyes at the time because I was going through a stressful time. So I just listened to it and I enjoyed it on audio, but like 3-star enjoyment. Whereas when I'm reading it with my eyes, it's like 5 stars because I'm following it better. I know who everybody is.
Rich is so excited.
Little dance.
What?
Rich did a little dance because he was really excited when you said 5-star enjoyment.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely, no question about it. It's a 5-star. Even when I was like 3-star enjoyment of the audiobook, I was like, if I was reading this with my eyes, it would be 5-star. I knew it the whole time. It was hard. It was hard to follow on audiobook for me on first read.
Yeah, that makes sense because when you do know kind of where everything's going, you can look for the clues and you can focus probably more on some of the conversations that are happening because you know where the plot is going. So that would make more sense.
Yeah, because I think if I don't know what the point is already, I'm lost. I can't follow it very well. But since I kind of know where we're going to end up, it's like just discovering how we got there. So yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot more. And I enjoyed it the first time through a lot, but the second time through, I'm just like, wow, this is so cool.
Well, I feel like the tangents in this book on the first read, they can feel distracting to the plot. But I feel like once you're past the first read, they're very much enhancing the plot. Like they all go along. It's developing different ideas so there's like layers to the book. But it is, I remember the first time I read it, I was sort of like, whoa, what's going on here? I missed that. I didn't pick up on that. Like then after multiple reads, it's like, how did I miss that?
Yeah.
Like at one point, Erasmus is actually thinking like, gosh, if I interrupt Jad meditating, he'll turn me into a newt. And that's like in the first third of the book.
Wow. So it's almost like he was hinting that Jad was going to become an enchanter. Oh, an incantor.
Yeah, an incantor. Yeah, well, again, Jad even comes out and like hints like, that he's got super long life, longevity, it just comes out and says stuff, but the book kind of like, I think there's like this cognitive dissonance, like nobody like acknowledges it. And so it's easy to kind of not think about it.
Because there's so much other information in there that it's like,
true.
Yeah, it's hard to see what's important. And it's almost, Brandon Sanderson does the same thing sometimes. There's just so much detail and so much going on where it's like, I never am able to guess where Brandon Sanderson is going. And I only knew that where this one was going because I read some of the blurbs of reviews on it that were in the front. And one of them said, it's a first contact story. I was like, oh, and that got me really excited, because I was like, oh, now I know where we're going. So, but otherwise I might have had trouble figuring that out as I was getting
nobody had monks in space on their bingo card.
No, although I wasn't surprised that Erasmus ended up in space after Jezri did initially with the Warden of Heaven. I was like, they're probably all going to end up in space at some point. Like, I wasn't surprised, but that was only because Jezri had already been.
Right.
So initially, I would have had no idea from the initial setting in like the consent or, whatever. I would not have guessed that was where we were going with this.
Well, something about like it's very slow to get started. And something that I don't know if I said it on the last live stream or not, or I just said it in Discord, but just something that's really nice about the slow start is you get to actually immerse in their culture and get their background, because if they just dove right in and just left the consent, then it's just sort of like you think of them like, oh, they're just monks or whatever. Like you just make the analogies in our, in your own practical experience, and you don't really understand where they're coming from and just how different in many ways this world is. So it's kind of, it's like spending, I think it was Murphy or somebody said this about Wheel Time. It's like, spending a lot of time in the Shire, at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The hobbits don't, take 12 chapters to get going or whatever.
I think you also, when you do that kind of a thing, you kind of get the sense of like loss that they feel when then they're forced out of it. And they've lived there, especially Fra Jad as a Thousandar that had been there for so long. And now they're thrust into the real world with technology that they haven't even seen because they've lived there for so long. And so you really get the sense, a much stronger sense of jarring when they leave, because you've become immersed in like kind of a little bit more of like a low tech world where they live, and then they're thrust into all these things they don't understand. So I think spending all that time in the beginning helps you feel that a lot more strongly.
That's a great point. Yeah, because you're like, after seeing all the architecture, the pretty places where they go, they even said that. They're like, in 1,000 years, everybody's going to wonder why we left because it's so pretty.
Yeah, they feel very displaced. And you feel that strongly.
Well, and there's a bit of a return to it in the epilogue, where they're like building this new consent, and again, they're just digging holes and laying cinder blocks or whatever, well, stones or whatever, and trying to recapture some of their culture.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, that's why I'm rereading it, is because when I was listening on audio, I felt like I missed a lot about the ending. So
he is killing me over here.
I like the stream of consciousness we have going on here.
It really is. We're just getting
I love it.
feelings.
It's great. I also love the comment about Lucy and the chants.
Yes, yeah. After all the pictures we got of Lucy, just like so angry. Especially, was it the beginning of 7?
It was 8.
8. The beginning of 8.
No, it was 7. I'm sorry.
It was whatever the last section was of the last.
Yeah.
Slide, and she was angry.
Yeah.
Startled her.
It startled me too.
Anyway. Victoria, I don't know if you're reading the paper book, you wouldn't get this, but every part starts with a chant on the audio.
That's cool.
Yeah,
there's actually there is a soundtrack. Is it complete? Actually, I think it is complete. I could send you the Spotify link.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
I know it's on Discord somewhere too.
I didn't have access to an audio, so yeah, I've been trying to read it with my eyeballs, and I think that's also is why I've been so slow. But I was like, at the same time, I was like, I don't know that I would enjoy it on audio because of like all the language being so different and terminology. So I was like torn between like, should I find the audio or not?
I'll be honest. So my first read was on audio. I think it probably did hurt my comprehension of it. But I think this is also one of those books that it's better to read it twice fast than once slow, because then you kind of see where, you can kind of view it more as a whole and it's a little less linear that way.
Okay.
But I mean, I would not begrudge anybody for DNFing it. It's very much, I feel like this isn't a book for everybody, for sure. This is very typical of Neil Stephenson's style, though, and he is a very popular author. But even him, his books, I struggle to get into some of his books.
I know Christy's making me think I need to push through.
Honestly,
I think it's rewarding, but go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, I would say I think Rich's advice of twice fast is better than slow. Probably smart, because once because the audiobook helped me when I couldn't read it with my eyes, and it got me really excited to go back and see what I'd missed. So I think that's good advice, because it is hard to plod through some of the more difficult stuff if you don't know where it's going. But if you do, and you're like, oh, this was so cool, and then you're excited to go back and enjoy the ride. I definitely think that's true.
What else has he written, Rich?
Oh, gosh. Well, probably the thing everybody talks about the most is probably Snow Crash. He wrote that in 1990 2 or 3, and it ended up being very prescient about like the internet and virtual reality and a lot of internet culture and cyberpunk, and that's probably the one people talk about the most. I don't think it's his best book, but that's the one with the Ninja Mafia pizza delivery.
Right,
driver,
we talked about that last time.
Meets the Tower of Babel. Kind of like he takes these really. What do these two have to do with each other? Well, what does Plato and quantum mechanics have to do with each other? That's something Stephenson tends to do. Is he takes like these, these really these things that have nothing to do with each other and somehow mashes them into like an interesting story. That's I think what's really interesting, is most of the stuff in Anathem isn't novel ideas taken individually. It's just a bunch of common like popular ideas in science, or philosophy, but he just kind of mashes them together in a very creative way.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how is it just the Edharians who believe so strongly in the Steelyard, or is that like
well, no, the Steelyard is just that's Occam's razor, and everybody accepts that.
Everybody accepts it. Okay.
But the
because not everybody accepts it currently on Earth. So that was interesting. That everybody accepts it.
In that sense, yeah. So if you look at the seculars or whatever in Anathem, or the Slines or whatever, I don't know that they, put a lot of stock in Occam's razor either. But
okay.
But among the different branches, I mean, the big things are you have the Proteans and the Halicarnians, and the Edharians are Halicarnians, so they believe in Platonic realism. Like the idea that 3 is a prime number, and it was a prime number before humans ever walked the earth. The concept of primeness is just a thing that exists on its own. It's not just something we come up with in our head. Whereas nominalism is like the idea that really it's just, everything, the way we categorize things are cultural, and the way we organize them and talk about them. But, somebody in another world could look at the same things very differently.
I love that when you said novel ideas, Rich, but it's not novel ideas. It's just a whole bunch of things that I was like, I thought you were talking about her channel name for a split second. And then I was like, wait, no, that's
great.
Not.
I love it. I love it. So just a little casual observation I'll toss out there. So I don't know if it's a sketch point. This is an interesting book because it actually has 2 Gandalfs in it, and they both die.
Oh, okay.
And it's just an interesting parallel because, of course, in the first half of the book, the Gandalf is Orlo.
Right.
And then the second half of the book, the Gandalf is Jad. And they both kind of form this mentoring relationship. Obviously, there's a much more emotional connection to Orlo and more of an intellectual camaraderie, more of Jad or whatever. But it's just an interesting, because you have basically 2 different guide characters, and in some ways they drive the plot a lot more than in the church. Like they don't just get it started.
I was like, wait, but neither of them came back, but they might have in another world track. Maybe in another world track they both came back to life.
Or didn't die.
Yeah. But
we actually saw some of that with Jad. We actually saw some of that world track.
Yeah, I think that I think they said there was no world track that Arolo could have not died and had the outcome that needed to happen. I think I remember them saying that.
But that was wild that like Jad dies before they even like get to space in the world track that everybody on Earth is following. But then they're in a different world track in space and they don't even know that he died, It's like
Well, then that's where the things start getting weird. Like where like they have the communications problems, and it's like, well, did Jad live or did he die? And when they reply, they don't actually give him a straight answer. It's like, what do you mean? Did he live or did he die? Like they didn't even answer the question, and you get like this disconnection. And that's where you get the idea where you're now in a world where Jad might have lived, maybe he did die. And like this concept of what they call it, the wandering 10,000-year math, or what they call it, causal domain shear is like the term they use, like where, if we're doing all this stuff on Earth and somebody else is doing something else on another planet on the other side of the universe, do we even, for all practical purposes, we don't even exist in the same universe. Like nothing the one does has any effect on what the other does. And it's
start getting weird. that was the moment where I started getting very confused. Was when that started happening. That was when I was like, I have no idea.
That's the idea. And then you get like the role of the Redders, which they didn't really get dived into much, but like Lodegear and everything, where the idea that it's what you write down that ends up defining reality. And, in a certain sense, there is a truth to it. Like, what is the truth of history 200 years ago, or especially if you go 2,000 years ago? It's what people wrote down. That is reality in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, we intellectually know that reality was something apart from what was written about it, but for all practical purposes, like what were the Greeks like? Well, I don't know, read Plato or whatever, or, some history from the time, because that's all you got.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was super interesting. Okay.
Along those lines, I actually put out, like, it's interesting, like, aside from that, like in the modern context, like, there's a lot of cultural conflict over the concepts of misinformation and the internet. And actually is in the book, where like they have these AI bots that spread around the internet, spreading misinformation. And apparently, almost becoming sentient and invading the earth from the description it's just mentioned in passing. But it's just this on another level. It's sort of like you influence enough people to think something's real, and it's, for all intents and purposes, real.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. You feel like you knew Erasmus because you're reading what he wrote.
Oh,
interesting.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're definitely in his head. Like, you get his
Very much
opinions.
so.
And
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So, okay, I had a question too. So, if Javarn is from Earth, what is the food that he ate? Because
Yes.
that did not sound like our food. Like, at one point, I was like, okay, maybe it's like a pasta with, like, I don't know, shellfish, but like we don't eat the shells of the shellfish,
I was thinking like bugs, because in other cultures they eat, insects.
That's
what I was thinking.
crunchy because it was so crunchy.
And it mentioned an exoskeleton.
Oh,
so it could have just been shrimp or something like that. Like when I went to Japan and got sushi, I got this thing it was a piece of shrimp, but I mean it had the head and the tail and everything. I mean it was the whole shrimp on a bed of rice.
Interesting.
that's a good point.
Yeah, I was looking down at my food. My food was looking up at me.
You know what?
Was it deveined? Do I want to know?
Soft
Yes,
crab.
soft shell crab. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh.
Soft shell crab.
I didn't think about that.
Could
Okay,
be.
but that would not be the most convenient food to like
Take
transport.
with you. Yeah.
Well, they
I would bring,
did, like, they all lived on
sandwich,
boats.
Personally.
I mean, they all lived on boats, right? So fish and things that grow in the water would be easier for them to probably
Okay,
cultivate.
yeah.
Like, didn't have
Right.
farmland on the ship.
Oh,
That makes
Probably
sense.
hydroponics and that sort of thing.
That's a good point.
And of course, they complained about smells and things like that. But the book establishes that smells are different. Like to your because they have different noses from different universes, the way they perceive smell
would be different.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. The hair
So I have
seems
a
to be a
question
vegetable.
to kind of bring it into the realm, and Victoria could probably contribute. The use of language. I mentioned this a bit in the first part, and I've heard a lot of this is something that when I read reviews on the book, that's something that people are often critical of, is because this use of language, like calling everything a different word, kind of makes it hard. And in some ways, it also, like, there's actually a lot of practical history you could learn just reading this book from Earth history, but because they change all the names and everything, you don't actually learn it. Is it a hindrance? But obviously the purpose for it is because this is a parallel universe and it's later to be contrasted with Earth. That's why you did it. And you can't explain that to somebody, at the beginning of the book without giving it away. So I don't know. I think in a lot of ways that's clever, but it is kind of unfortunate in a way that, like, nobody realizes that Baz is Rome and Ethris is Greece and whatever.
I don't think that the language is a hindrance. I think it creates that sense of otherworldliness and does more to steep you into the environment that you're in. But yeah, I do think, like, if I had known that, like, a little earlier, that I think he asks a lot of the reader. I think that's probably the part that is kind of like halting me, is I feel like Stevenson is asking a lot of the reader up front to like throw you in the weeds, and you're just in the weeds, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I think in some ways that might alienate some readers who maybe don't have the patience for that, like me.
Yeah, like let's talk about configuration space. Let's talk about causal domain share. Let's talk about Platonic realism and nominalism. Let's talk about orbital, like all this stuff, and it all pays off eventually. But he's like, kind of like, this is the first day of school. Why do we have to learn how to do this stuff? What will we ever use this for?
Yeah. Well, and that's why, like, I've actually, like, hearing you guys talk about it actually is helping me a lot. And I'm like, okay, maybe now that I have a little bit of information, I'm like, okay, so this might be making sense eventually. Maybe even on a reread, like Christy's doing. But yeah, I think that was the kind of like just dropping you into ice water, and you're just like, I'm shocked. What do I do? I don't know what's going on.
Now, the philosophy, I think, actually has it's I like the way it makes me think. Like, I was in between the two parts to space them out, so I'd be closer to the live show. I read a lot of, or I listened to Phantoms in the Brain, nonfiction, talking about, it's a lot about how we perceive the world and phantom limbs and things like that. And like, you read the analogies in the middle of this book in Anathem, like there's the fly bat worm analogy that gets used a lot. And what this is all, and then the Skonics, and the whole idea is that the world we live in our heads isn't exactly the real world. It's our perception of the world, and our brain has like a mental model of the world around us that it's constantly taking in data and updating. But ultimately, our actions are based upon our perception of the world. Which is why you can have optical illusions and all sorts of crazy things that are just as real to us as what we see with our eyes, because that's what our brain actually is using. And it's just so neat, to understand, like, to think about that. And it's just, I find it a fascinating topic. Of course, my wife had a stroke, and I, kind of experienced some of that firsthand, how she would interact with the world. But it's just such an interesting, like this concept of reality. And, I think Sanderson kind of gets at that in his cognitive realm. Here, it's like there's like an infinite number of layers of them. But like what is true, like from an conceptually, what is true in reality, what's true in our minds, and like they're all related, but not exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
And I feel like that's a continuous process, like for Erasmus, because along with us, our view of the story is just suddenly shifting at fairly regular intervals, and our understanding changes suddenly. Our whole perception of what's going on will just suddenly shift with like revelations. Like a very small example would be when Erasmus hears Barb laughing at Lodegear, one of his jokes, and he's like, oh, like Lodegear might just be Barb, several years into Barb's life. Like now he has a bit of a different, because Barb can be like tiresome for him, but he likes Barb. He doesn't like Lodegear, but he's just kind of, this is how he is, and you just kind of get used to it over time. That's like a very small example, but that was, as I was reviewing it,
very relatable.
Yes.
I feel like we all have one of those in our life.
Yeah, so that's something that's kind of like one of my other bullets on here is the role of rhetoric. Like rhetoric is like really big in this book, like dialogue and formalized debate and so on. And it's not just what's true or false, but your ability to persuade others of what's true and false in so many different ways. And it's just, that is so real, because it's like, it doesn't matter if something's, well, it does, but at the same time, it can be so frustrating when it's like, this other person is explaining their side so much better than I'm explaining my side, and of course it's, when we digest stuff, it's so tempting to look at the presentation and not think about what's inside.
This is hilarious. I was just cracking up. Looking at something that looks the same.
I know exactly what she's talking about, but I think I sort of know what she's talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
like an example that
the other day,
my wife, when she would sign her name, her first name would very naturally flow out of her signature and would be like an exact, like it perfect penmanship, like it was how she signed her name. But her last name, well, her married last name to me, because she took my name, wouldn't flow naturally when she signed it, because her muscle memory for that did not go all the way back to childhood. But if she signed her maiden name, I guess it made it, because whatever, it would be much more natural. And so things like she would call her children by her sister's names, because they're familial. But if you go back, because the way our patterns are laid in the brain,
that's hilarious. My mom does that all the time. She calls me my aunt's name, and she calls my brother my uncle's name.
Well, I felt bad for my stepson, because she had two sisters and a son and a daughter. And unfortunately, her son just had to take her younger sister's name.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
How the brain works.
I mean, that was like for 6 months or so, but or like when she just wasn't thinking. No, but that makes sense, though. They become so ingrained in your brain and your habits, you just don't even realize it until somebody points it out. So what did people think of the dictionary entries throughout the text and their placement? It's something I'm reread. I really appreciate. Like, often they create a sense of foreboding, and
I like them even not being very far through the book, because I like them. And also I like the multiple definitions, and like some definitions give you more clues to things than other ones, and then you're like, oh, that's interesting. I enjoyed them.
I liked the dictionary entries a lot as well, especially as someone who did not have a glossary. I really paid attention to them because I needed them.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, especially like fundamental ones, like when you get to towards the end of the book, you get words like encounter or the terrible events or everything killer, and like like things like okay, we're Chekhov's gun is on the stage.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of them would just be right before a section where it was like ended up being super relevant. So it gave you like I see what you're saying with the foreboding, but even with sections where it wasn't quite as foreboding, like for example, there's a section where the definition was all's well, and then that was the same section where Erasmus realized that he was looking super optimistically at things, and then he's like, could just be the food I'm eating. And I was like, oh. So like there were times that it just like, well, I mean, I always felt like it tied in really well, but there were certain times where I was like, oh, that gave me so much clarity.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, the hazards of putting antidepressants in everything you eat.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, a little anxiety isn't a bad thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's self-preservation.
Sometimes they are out to get you.
It depends.
So here's a thought. Like the whole book, like one of the central themes is Platonic realism and nominalism. Like do ideas have a reality independent of our thinking? And I'm kind of curious, like I've had my take on how the book explores that. I'm kind of curious, do you guys feel like the book took a hard stance, like one way or the other? And was that good for the book or bad?
On which issue? I'm sorry.
Like Platonic realism. So our ideas, something that have their own like independent existence, like the idea of the Hylian theoric world as they describe it, but like the idea of, a prime number being a prime number, whether anybody ever wrote a book about that or not, or, like before the first philosopher. So this kind of goes to our books created or discovered is how I sort of spin that to make it more literary. But that's like a central theme, and it's like the Proteans and the Halicarnians in the book.
I really felt like it took a strong stance that it's real, but at the same time, we aren't actually aware of any Hylian theoric world. Like we don't actually know of any other planets. So is it reality, or is it just for the sake of the book that he's arguing this? Like it's real in the book. I don't know. I don't know if that was like, to me, that was like the most overarching idea that he seems to be arguing for. There were like kind of sub ideas that I think he was also arguing for, but like also we don't know, we don't have any, was Tros one of the worlds? I mean, like, we don't know of any other worlds other than Laterre. So it's hard to say if those are, if that is applicable to our lives, but definitely in the book, I felt like he was arguing for the existence of that.
Yeah, and there's also an element of humor, like when they're in that big plenary, like when Erasmus is up on the stage when he gets back from ECBA, and it's like, okay, yeah, sure, aliens are invading the Earth or whatever, but for the first time in history, we might be able to settle this philosophical debate over whether ideas are real or not. And that's what we really want to focus on here.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I would rather like, there's other things that I would want to solve if I met an alien that I'd be more interested in than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love though that they were like on the same page. This is like the thing we want to solve.
So funny.
And who was it? M.M. Baldo or whatever, like the guy who was like the servitor to Ignatz Forel. And so he was like the guy that Erasmus got to explain everything to in the messel. Yeah. But he's kind of like, why are we arguing about philosophy? There's a ship loaded with nuclear weapons orbiting the planet, And
priorities, people.
You can tell what they are most interested in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Uh,
Now
and
that I
then-
know there's aliens, now I do want to read it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting premise. And like we've said, I think once you have more context, it's easier to follow. Like
We
if
have
I
met
read it
the
again.
aliens, and they are us.
Yeah. Yes.
yeah.
For real.
But I guess, that's why I'm not an avowed.
Yeah.
I am a swine through and through.
I also like the word slime for like a commoner. I was like, what a creatively perfect word for
Yeah.
like
It is.
like a common
It really
person.
is.
Slime.
And like the way it sounds and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I was like, that's really brilliant.
Yeah.
Autocorrect kept trying to change it to slime every time I type it out.
Mhm.
Every time.
That's funny.
I was wondering, Rich, why was there no other Thousanders at the Convox other than Jad? Was there a reason for that you could tell?
I mean, I'm speculating. Part of me wonders, like, how did Jad end up on this thing? Because one of the problems with Evoco is, in order to be evoked, somebody has to know that they're relevant, right? Like that was part of it. Like, so the message goes out, I need people that are experts in this, this, and this. How do you find them? And with the millennials up on their crag, completely isolated, how does anybody know who's the expert on whatever? But I think the book doesn't say it, but I think the way Jad kind of came out is you have the whole the lineage thing going on and the Forals and all that, and there's sort of a hint that they actually are in communication with the millenarians. And because like Jad makes a comment, like when he's looking at Orlo's notes, he's kind of like, oh, he's onto something here. And Jad actually makes a comment that in time he might have been sort of plucked out and sent up to the crag to get him out of there, because he was on the verge of discovering, the secrets of the Incanters. And and the book does suggest that, like, some of the concepts, like the evanadrician datonomy or whatever they call it, like that got introduced, and it was only like 80 years later that the third sack happened or whatever. Like this idea comes out into the world, and that was like the breakthrough that led to the Incanters or whatever. And Orla was kind of on the cusp of appreciating that stuff. So it's that's kind of, it didn't answer your question, but it's sort of like,
no, it did. Yeah, at the very beginning, it was like, how would they even know who the Thousanders are? That's a good thought. Good thought.
Well, and that's and Erasmus actually talks about that. Oh,
Hi.
He wants to say hi.
Erasmus actually talks about that, like why they think that the Eda spy on them because of Voco, and because how does the secular power know who to evoke? Well, they need intelligence on what's going on inside the math, and the Eda are the natural people to do it because they are technologically inclined, but in communication.
Okay, that makes sense.
I got a monster truck.
You have a monster truck?
So
Oh my
cool.
goodness, it's so cool.
Are there any monster trucks in Anathem?
There are vehicles.
He's like,
There
I
are.
read it last night. Let me check my notes.
You'll
In
get to
fact-
some
in fact,
vehicles later.
there's getting a truck up the hill out of the volcano is one of the.
Yep.
Oh.
Water. The water.
The water.
Water.
Lots of volcanoes and analemmas and all kinds of fun things.
So you'll read it someday, huh?
You'll probably understand it all.
Right.
I bet Claire would understand it better than anyone.
Probably.
Right. Oh my god.
She'd be like, "Oh yeah, of course."
And then she'd make a video on it.
She
Yeah.
would. She'd
explaining
do a
everything.
parody video,
Yeah.
and Rich would think it's hilarious, and I'd be like, I don't understand.
She would make it with the unicorn.
The unicorn.
Yes.
Or was it a unicorn? Or was it a dragon?
Oh, the pink nerve gas farting dragons.
Dragon.
Oh.
I don't know why I have
Okay.
unicorn on the brain. Yes, she'd make it with the dragons.
She
Yeah.
would.
That's
That's
about
the
where
mini
that's about where I stopped reading was the pink farting dragons. That was where I had stopped.
Or the shark.
I got that far.
Or the ice cube in the middle of the star, you know. All this
Yeah.
Okay, that's a conversation that I was like, huh? Like my eyes glazed over during that one. I thought some of their conversations were interesting, and that one I'm like, what? That was one I did not understand. And I was like,
Yeah, well,
oh, this is going.
Yeah, but ultimately what they're getting at, they're getting a whole bunch of ideas, but like that's how does your brain, like your brain has a filter when you get data coming in or you read an account and you look at it and it's like, this isn't real or this is real. How's that actually working? And a lot of it's reason. Like, do these things connect together? Your brain is constantly looking for inconsistencies. Like that the wind rustled that bush over there. Well, was it the wind or was it a tiger about to jump out and eat you? You know, like there's like a primitive part of our brain
Oh, a
that's
monster truck.
looking for the signs that maybe it wasn't the wind.
Oh, okay.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson actually made a really neat analogy about the nature of curiosity and like why in some ways we tend to be conservative and we tend not to embrace curiosity. And it's like, well, if you think about it, you have the one caveman's really curious and he sees the bush rustle and like, oh, let me go check that out. And the other one says, oh, let me get my spear ready and kind of keep my distance. You know, the one end might end up becoming tiger chow and the other one, you know, might live, you know, another day. So.
I love it.
Idea.
Oh, bye, Dia.
Yeah, your comments have been great. Thanks. It was a joy to read with you. That's like, you know, it was a joy reading with all of you. You know, it's really interesting hearing your thoughts and, you know, it's, I wasn't expecting everybody to necessarily consider this their favorite book, even if it ought to be, but it's.
And we got to see a Rich dance when Chrissy said it.
We
might
did.
Be ours.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Do you have anything else?
So should I ask, are books created or are they discovered? Is that should we?
A little bit of both.
That's my stance.
Well, here's the question: did this book make you think about that question differently?
I don't think so, because I think that was kind of what I thought at the beginning. I couldn't vote for both on the poll you put on Discord.
Yeah.
So you didn't put both.
I was
mean.
intentional about that.
I think both.
That would have been too
elements
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely. I thoroughly enjoyed like the community reading aspect of it. It was a lot of fun to read with people and hear people's thoughts. You know, I don't think there's. I mean, I kind of gave my perspective on a lot of stuff, but there's no right or wrong. And I think also we didn't talk about it much, but I do feel like there are a lot of connections to like honestly the way Sanderson did the cognitive realm. I didn't connect with as much at first, but actually even after this read, especially and thinking about the fly bat worm thing and all that, it really made me appreciate how our perception of things is another kind of reality.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely, this read along has made me look at things a little more deeply as we're talking about it, which has been fun.
Yeah. And I've loved all your insights, Rich. That's really helps me a lot because this isn't the kind of book that I would normally read. So it's very far outside my comfort zone in terms of a lot of the intellectual things that it tackles. But I knew I would feel better after talking to you, and I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
this
a
is
safe
definitely
space.
there's a lot more conceptual sci-fi to this book for sure.
Mhm. And a lot of the kind of technical conversations about some of the scientific things. I'm just like, I don't know a ton about science. I don't know much about quantum mechanics. So there's a lot of, like Victoria talked about, getting lost in the weeds. I felt that way with a lot of the conversations because I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about this, so I don't know what they're saying. But there were elements to it that I thought were really interesting. I just felt like I wasn't smart enough for a lot of it.
Well, it takes on those topics. It takes kind of a superficial. It's like it talks about orbital mechanics. That's like it's not even Kerbal Space Program orbital mechanics, but it's kind of all that stuff is somewhat entry level, but it's also like it's not part of normal daily.
Right.
Like these aren't things you talk about at the grocery store with people normally. So it's definitely, depending on how much of this you've been exposed to, it affects, like the philosophy to me was the newer thing. Orbital mechanics and quantum mechanics, not so much. But that's just my background.
Yeah. So I appreciated your background. It was very helpful for me.
Yeah.
Well, did anyone else have any other? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna add, like you telling us like this mirrors our world in this mirrors our world in this. That made it make a little more sense too, like ground you more in it.
Yeah,
I missed a lot of those connections, honestly.
Yeah. Well, you're this is your opportunity to become a meta laurite. So it's and if you actually, I mean, there's a lot of connections even I didn't make, and if you go into the Anathem wiki and stuff, you'll find for most of the characters, or like anybody like historical in the book, they'll tell you what inspirations, or what the analogies are. Somebody actually made
the wiki.
I know. I was like, "There's an Anathem
idiot."
wiki." This is what I
That would have
need.
helped.
It's like a wiki kind of. It's not like this isn't like the Coppermind, but it's
right.
This book came a little too early because this was like 2008, so the internet was around, but it was kind of like in the podcast. YouTube wasn't super popular. It was that era. It was the MySpace era of the internet, not the Facebook era. So it just the information online is not the same.
That makes sense. It would benefit from a Coppermind.
It would.
Oh yeah, that would have helped me a lot.
Yes.
Rich, you need to make one.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's not like. I mean, the Cosmere or whatever. There's like thousands of pages of interconnected books and stuff. There's a lot more to draw on.
Yeah,
plus it's all made up.
Anathem would be way easier for you to do. Because it's just one book.
Right. You could do it over a weekend. It's fine.
Yeah, I'll believe in you. I'll use it when I reread it.
Yeah.
Well, did anyone else have any other thoughts or things they wanted to share?
I think
you've gotten me more interested in continuing. I might continue.
Well, good.
I just might.
Well, I'm happy to chat about it at any time. I mean, definitely don't feel like you have to be at a certain level. It's a fun book, and it can just be a fun book. Honestly, I feel like it gets you to think about things, and you don't have to, grok all of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to release my perfectionism a little bit.
Yeah, and I think reading the chats you guys had in the Discord was nice too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of comments on there from a lot of different people. So
mostly one person, but
well, yeah, but Dio was in there, and there's someone else that was in there. I can't remember who. There's a couple people that were in there that were contributing.
For sure.
More than I was because I was far behind everyone else's conversation. So by the time I got to it, I was kind of like, okay, it's been like several weeks since Rich posted this.
Honestly, that's actually why I like rereads. I am completely sympathetic to that because for first time reads, I am not nearly as active in Discords because I don't want to spoil myself. I don't want to hear people's theories as much because I'd rather, I might not like if I read the book at the same time as Stacy or something, she's got the end figured out in chapter 3, whereas, and I'd like to, discover it for myself, but it's so it is difficult with rereads. It's so much easier because it's just you're reading. It's a different type of reading.
Right. Yeah, and like Christy was saying, knowing the ending, she can now like focus in on all these other things and see.
Oh yeah,
all the connections that you miss on the first time.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, you definitely.
Christy, she's back. I just said your name and then you appeared.
It's like Beetlejuice.
I didn't even have to say it 3 times. I only said it once.
Sorry for disappearing.
You're that connected.
Yeah, we're that connected. I said her name once and here she was. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Christy? Well, I'll wait.
Sorry.
No, I just wanted
no,
to
I think I had so many thoughts on it. Like, honestly, it would probably take me another hour to like go through all my notes. And so I think probably an hour and 15 minutes is good enough. I think that's funny.
Well, that's great, Chris. That means you can make like a review video and put your whole cohesive.
I want an Anathem video.
I went through all my notes in Anathem video.
Yeah,
I very well might. Honestly,
that would be so fun.
I would watch that.
It was so fun.
Yes.
Say for fun, I could link. There's actually a review in Nature for this one. It's kind of spoilery, so I don't tend to promote it. But
Nature magazine.
There's not a lot of fiction that gets into Nature with book reviews.
That's so cool.
That is cool.
And if anybody ever wants to read another Stephenson book, whether I've read it or not, I'm definitely up for it. So.
I totally want to read Snow Crash.
It's not its best. It's got some issues, but it is fun, and it's got some really interesting ideas.
That's what I'm here for.
Right at my alley.
Yeah, the books I've read of his are Anathem, Snow Crash, and I've read Cryptonomicon, and that's also very good, especially if you're into like the math crypto stuff.
So you would recommend that one higher than
70?
Somebody's like, no.
I'm not a math person.
It's cryptography and World War II, and he does some weird stuff in that book that I didn't care for, but it's like these made up cultures and just weird things, but it's still a fun book for the math and the crypto and all that. The some of his others, there's a whole bunch of books I'd love to read. I struggle. Like I'm actually like Victoria. Like most of those books, I'll get like 50, 100 pages in, and I'm like, it's not connecting. Once you get past a certain point and you're like in the world, then you want to keep reading. Another author I like, who's a little, I don't know, I could go on all day with book recognition, but Charles Stross has a lot of good stuff that has a lot of interesting, there's a lot of modern sci-fi authors that have interesting ideas. So.
Yeah.
Is that spelled like Strauss?
No, Stross. Stross. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best part of sci-fi, honestly, is the idea exploration. So.
Yeah, a lot of his stuff is around like the idea of technological singularity, which is the idea that at some point the rate of knowledge growth exceeds the human capacity to comprehend it all. And like, do you ever feel like, if you ever feel like you can't keep up with the news, just take that, but to the point where everything, how like people that are older sometimes struggle with change and like, gosh, now use your cell phone to pay your credit card bills and this, that, whatever else. Well, just imagine that gets to the point where nobody can keep up with what's changing. Like those are the ideas he explores.
That's interesting.
That would be interesting.
I love how he talked about. You were talking about technological change, right?
Yeah, and transhumanism and things like that.
So it was interesting because he mentioned in this book that the people in the maths are a zoo for people who are tired of keeping up with the politics, but they're really interested in technology. Whereas the Slions are like, too much technology, we don't care. And they're more
that's a
interested
concept. I'm sorry, I don't want to make the stream another hour long, but that's like a fascinating concept. Like these ideas of these long-term projects where like these people will go off and for 100 years have no contact with the world, and they'll just develop their theories in total isolation, or 1,000 years. And, like this pursuit of, like where Erasmus says to Jad, like, gosh, it's already been like a day, or we've already lost a day and we got to get to Tredegar or else. And Jad's like, a day, here's the 1,000er, it's been in a culture that's been sequestered for hundreds of years from the rest of the world. And Erasmus is concerned because he's behind by a day. And just the idea of like sitting underneath the page tree, drinking your wine and talking about philosophy or whatever. Then going to tend the bees.
That was one of the sad moments when they were leaving the math, and Erasmus was running by all the trees that were heavy with leaves that wouldn't be harvested for paper.
Or the idea that they would harvest like these leaves and they'd set them aside to dry for 100 years and go and then grab some other basket of dried out leaves that somebody else made. It's like, can you imagine in today's world the idea of harvesting leaves so that your great grandchildren would have books? Like nobody's got that. It's sort of like, oh, let's just skip the harvesting the leaves part. Let's just grab the trees out of the leaves out of the basement. That's all we need. Who cares though what happens 100 years from now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely admire what his brain does. He has some very interesting, unique ideas. And like you said earlier, connecting the most random things. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I never would have thought to put those two things together.
Yeah, I admire that creativity. I think that's so impressive.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been fun.
Oh, it's been loads of fun. I can't thank all of you enough for joining me in this.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you suggested reading this together. We got to read a book that you love together and chat about it.
We've actually gotten to read a bunch of books we love.
Well, yeah, I know.
Most of us might not have picked up either.
So. I wouldn't have otherwise, except for you
Yeah.
raving about it. So I'm really glad I got to read it with you and hear all your thoughts, especially since you love it so much. It was really fun.
Yes.
Huge thank you to Stephanie and Tiffany for hosting.
Oh yeah, happy to.
Yes.
Stephanie made the thumbnails, so I can't take any credit for that.
It's a beaubeautiful thumbnail.
I made the Feb Regency one.
And I was like, I couldn't do anything.
Yes, we had a very good symbiotic relationship.
We did. Because we split the lives for Feb Regency and Anathem, and then we each made thumbnails for one of the events. So it was perfect.
It was wonderful.
And now we'll have to plan our next one.
Yeah, maybe we can do something in the fall or something. That would be
yes. Let's do it.
We'll figure something out. We'll figure something out, and we'll get back to all of you who have enjoyed joining us for Storm Along, Mist Along, Anathem Along. We should have said that. We should have called it Anathem Along, but we didn't. Missed opportunity. Time to create a hashtag.
It makes me think of heffalumps and woozles for some reason.
Love that.
Anathem Along.
I did feel very confusal during parts of this book, like a heffalump or woozle. Very confusal. Well, anyways, I hope everyone who watches this back, if you want to leave your thoughts in the comments, you can do that, or you can hop over on Discord and share your thoughts there, because there's lots of lots of thoughts, but I know several people have told me that they are still in the process of reading this. So they have not finished and that they're going to come back and watch the lives later.
Oh,
We'd love to hear your thoughts whenever you finish. And thank you for joining us. And thank you to all of my co-hosts for joining as well. And we'll see you again at some point. We'll get the gang back together for another read along at some point. So have a good rest of your day. Bye.